Hey there everyone, hope you're doing well. Ketchup Kami-sama here with some more Ramlethal tech for you guys since she's still the only character that I play in Guilty Gear Strive. But what I've got for you today is essentially part 2 for my guide on how to use swords in the corner to maximize your pressure. While it's not absolutely necessary that you watch part 1 before this, I obviously highly recommend checking it out as I'll be referring to pieces from that video in here from time to time. This video of course will be broken down into a few different sections, the first part just going over some more details about using heavy sword toss off of sweep along with 236S, and the second part will be going over ways to use both swords mid-combo that enable strong mix-up opportunities. Before we get started, just a quick disclaimer. The current patch as of recording this video is patch 1.09, so everything here is subject to change in the future. If these setups stop working by the time you're watching this, that just might be why. If you like the content that I'm putting out, of course, go ahead and like and subscribe so you don't miss anything in the future and to spread the word around, but without further ado, let's just get right into it. So to get things started, I want to quickly go over a few specific details about 2D into heavy sword toss off of Soul, Chip, and Zato. In case you haven't watched my previous video, the reason I'm talking about these three specifically is because 2D, or even 2K 2D immediately into sword toss will whiff, allowing a guaranteed 50-50 if we empty jump and they don't DP. However, let's discuss what to do with Soul and Chip if they do decide to invincible reversal. For Chip, it's pretty straightforward. If you jump and block the DP in the air, you can still punish him on landing, and your falling overhead button will come after they're able to DP, meaning you shouldn't be getting countered here. For Soul, this isn't the case unfortunately, but we can slightly change our approach to fix this. You can either micro walk forward, then IAD, or jump and slightly delay your IAD so that the DP whiffs, which is especially nice here since they won't be able to Roman cancel and save themselves. This allows you to still get a guaranteed overhead if they just block the explosion, but unfortunately the low can now be thrown here. Hopefully, if you beat out their DP attempts with the safe jump, you might be able to go back to instantly IADing to guarantee the higher low again. With Zato, obviously it doesn't matter what you do as he doesn't have a reversal to be concerned about in the first place, so just have at it. Quick little note, for the characters this setup works on, including those outside of the three I just discussed, just know that if you only jump forward to get the 50-50, you will only be able to do this one more time before the sword stops getting picked up automatically after landing. Alright, now there are a few characters where using heavy sword toss after 2D doesn't get you a guaranteed high-low, but using the slash version instead will help cover some of these gaps. To explain the setup, all you do after sweep is 236S, IAD forward, and JH. This will serve as a safe jump for the handful of characters with slower DPs, and if you condition your opponent to block high because they're now expecting the overhead, you can instead go for a low with 2K that's guaranteed and cannot be thrown or DP'd. If they try to crouch and avoid the explosion, the overhead comes out so soon after it that they won't really have enough time to try and counter you without getting their dome cracked open. However, if your opponent is aware of how this works, once you start going for lows, they can now crouch to avoid the explosion and counter you on landing. Thankfully, this is where an extremely low jump kick or jump punch can come into play instead of a meaty jump heavy, but these will start becoming vulnerable to 6P if they crouch on wake up and 6P shortly afterwards. Whether you hit them high or low, you can follow up with sweep and continue looping if the wall hasn't broken yet. Here's a few more points about going for the empty jump low that I think you guys should be aware of. Hitting an opponent while OTG will not break the wall, meaning that, as an example, if you were to do 2D into sword toss infinitely, you would keep the corner. Unfortunately, 2D can be countered by throw on landing, but if you've shown that at least 2K is not punishable, hopefully you can start throwing this in as the low option instead. For lightweight opponents, 2D immediately into sword toss will actually juggle them like in a normal combo, so you'll have to slightly delay your input if you're wanting to do this. Otherwise, just go for the timing as explained in my previous video to get the guaranteed 50-50. Alternatively, if you do 2D, 214P, and then dash cancel, you have enough advantage afterwards to do 236H without getting thrown. Just know that this will not work on medium or heavyweight characters, or even from 2K 2D into 214P on lightweights, it will only work from a 2D starter on lighter characters. As far as safe jumping goes, this will serve as one against Kai, excluding RTL Super, Axel, May, Potemkin, Faust, Milia, Ramlethal, Gold Lewis, and Jacko. There are a small handful of specific interactions to point out real quick though. For Potemkin's Gigantic Kai reversal, you have to throw on landing to punish, and this setup thankfully also avoids Heavenly Potbuster. Since Jacko's reversal is a command grab, you need to jump or backdash on landing to avoid and punish. Interestingly enough, this doesn't work on Nago even though he's got a 9-frame reversal, same as Ramlethal, but if he doesn't have meter, the setup works just fine otherwise. Well, that wraps up everything about this first portion of the video, and here's a little visual to help sort out what works on who since I've brought forth a good amount of specific details. So honestly, in most of my videos or tweets about this kind of stuff, I only really test using math and the training dummy at first before recording, and once I've labbed out most of it, that's when I take it online. Even though the setups off of Sweep are super powerful, I quickly remembered one itty bitty little problem when I started to actually play against other people, and it's that Ramlethal doesn't land 2D in the corner that often. If you're doing her typical sword pressure, hitting an opponent will juggle them instead of allowing you to get in the sweep for the loopable 50-50. I thought at first that my new setups were going to be almost never used, but thankfully, with enough time in the lab, I found the solution. Once again, 236S will come in to save the day, and here's how it works. This will be ideal off of 2S or 2K starters since they won't be juggled as high compared to close slash as an example. Either way, we'll start with a normal combo that leads into the sword explosion, but afterwards we'll run up, 6H, and cancel into 236S. Lastly, we'll do IAD jump heavy, and that's the whole thing. This works as a safe jump against everyone in the game currently, even characters with 7-frame DPs. Just make sure that you're doing jump heavy with the sword equipped, otherwise you can get countered. To ensure you don't ruin the setup, you might need to give it a slight delay after 6H before doing 236S. Aside from wake up DP, they can't jump out of it, throw it, mash out of it, they just have to eat it if they don't have enough meter to YRC or a burst available to use. Just so you know though, backdashing will avoid the meaty jump heavy, but it will lose to your other jump in options if you do them slightly later. Similar to using 236S off of 2D, if your opponent starts to stand block because they're expecting the overhead, you now have enough advantage to land in 2K into sweep, and from here, we can do all the things I discussed in the earlier part of this video. There is one exception to this as of right now, unfortunately, and that's Giovanna. Even when standing, the sword explosion will just whiff, but at least this still serves as a safe jump. This reset tool is going to be so important for maintaining the corner while racking up additional damage and meter. It'll take time to understand how to change the route slightly to ensure you don't break the wall too early, which is going to be key for really optimizing all of this. As an example, from a 2S 5H starter at full wall health, a follow-up 2K 2D after the reset will result in a wall splat, but just using 2D won't. From 2K into Sword Explosion, even if you do close slash into 6H, the follow-up 2K into 2D will allow you to reset the pressure again before breaking the wall. But before I get too deep into how to combine all of these different options, there's one last thing I want to cover about using swords, so let's go ahead and discuss using 236H instead. Alright, so similar concept applies here. We'll do sword toss after 6H, but the timing will be slightly changed here. If you weren't already aware, the swords will do different things to your opponent depending on how high they are in relation to the sword. If the sword and the opponent hit at equal height, they'll get carried straight across for a short distance. If the opponent is above the sword when it connects, they'll get juggled upwards immediately, and lastly, if the opponent is slightly below the sword, they'll get knocked downwards, just like in the setup I just described. Because of all this, we'll need to slightly delay the 236H input so that we don't juggle the opponent or carry them backwards. If done correctly, there are two general types of outcomes depending on your timing. One, the sword will whiff and explode shortly after they recover, or it'll hit the opponent and drag them back down to the ground. Both of these versions are good. It's not like one is worse than the other, it's just you can do slightly different things with each one. So I'll go into what you can do if the sword toss whiffs first. For starters, if done correctly, your opponent won't be able to jump away without being forced to block the explosion. If you're a tad too late, they'll be able to, but this might be a good thing if you read it and go for an air throw. You'll thankfully be out of reach for most DPs if you just sit still, and after the explosion you can run in and do all the things. You can also run in for a throw before the sword explodes, and even jump or backdash at the last second to bait out the throw break attempt, resulting in a combo. But if you look closely, you'll notice that there's now a gap between your opponent and the wall, and yes, this means you can cross them up. I haven't found a way to do this just yet without using meter, or one that is at least unpunishable, but maybe some lab monster out there can come up with one. I just thought this was at least neat to point out. Personally, even if I have the resources, I'm just going to stick with striker throw setups and save my meter for a super to wall break with, or to cover other gaps in my pressure if they block correctly. So let's talk about making the sword toss connect in the combo now. This one is a bit more difficult to pull off, as if you do it too early, it'll just juggle them, probably breaking the wall, and too late, you'll get the whiff, which at least isn't the end of the world, thankfully. The timing is definitely much trickier on lightweight opponents, so you'll just have to practice with all three weight types to really get it down. While this doesn't open up the corner for a cross-up, this makes the strike throw game much more potent. Once again, jumping immediately doesn't allow them to escape, and if they try to jump any later to avoid the potential grab, they'll just explode. If you run in and bait out the throw tech attempt, they'll also explode here. Regarding baiting out throws, while backdashing does work here, you might not have enough time to run up and get close slash afterwards if they simply stood there blocking the explosion. So I personally recommend just running up, jumping and getting a falling overhead so that if they don't throw, you can safely start up your pressure again. If you do happen to go for the throw though, there isn't enough time for them to DP before you get close enough, so now you've covered two of their defensive options here. As a quick aside, alternatively, you can replace 6H with 6P in the initial combo for similar results. This puts you closer for follow-up options after the sword toss, and depending on your timing, you can make it whiff or hit meaty. If the sword whiffs, the opponent can mash out of it on wake up, but if they don't, this makes it a little bit easier to run up for the throw. If the sword hits, well, obviously it counters mashing for a full combo, and if they block you, you can go into the standard Ramlethal pressure from here. I'm not immediately sure if there are situations where this would be more beneficial over doing 6H, maybe as a burst bait potentially, but thought it was at least worth enough to mention. Alright, that covers everything that I've got so far about these setups regarding execution and specific details, but here's where I would like to demonstrate why you would want to do all this instead of just breaking the wall with a full combo. And we'll bring in our other wife Jacko to help demonstrate this. For starters, we'll do a typical 2S starter B&B. From this combo, we get around 240 damage and about 3/5 of a tension bar if we start with nothing. But if we change things up a bit, we did enough damage to build 50 meter, and by the end of it did over 350 damage in total. Now we've taken off so much more of their health and have put them in a hard knockdown situation. Even starting with 2k, a normal combo will do around 177, but we could instead do all of this, and now we've broken the wall using a super and have meter to spare, and now they're already almost dead. Even against someone as powerful and meaty like Soul, we're able to eat right through a huge chunk of health by taking advantage of one mistake like this. And Milia? Well, Milia could very well instantly just die. Okay, I know that this of course is a staged scenario with everything going my way, but with everything that I've presented being thrown in, your reward will surely start to outweigh simply doing normal combos. So I hope this helps show you how using these alternative options can be beneficial and help you take your Ramlethal game to the next level, or floor in this case. Even if you're not a Ramlethal player, I challenge you to find similar ways to use your character's tools differently to explore new and more interesting options for yourself. You might just be surprised at what you find, just like I was with all of this. That's everything I've got for you all as of right now. If I've left anything out or if you have something for me to try, go ahead and let me know in the comments below. Also, feel free to take a peep at the Twitter for the random tidbits that don't make it into my videos. But anyway, if you're still here, thanks for sticking around to the very end and hope to see you again sometime soon. And until then, this is Ketchup Kami-sama, signing off. Until next time.